Death Trap. The Strange Story of Air France Flight 736. A journey begins. In the spring of 1959, Air France Flight 736, a routine passenger jet en route from Paris to Algiers, embarked on what was expected to be an uneventful trip. The aircraft, a Lockheed Constellation, was renowned for its sleek design and dependable performance. On board were 59 passengers and a crew of 6. The passengers ranged from business executives to families and students, all carrying their dreams, hopes, and lives in the small confines of the cabin. Among the travelers was a young journalist named Claude, assigned to write a piece on post-war developments in North Africa. Claude was ambitious, eager to make a name for himself, and a keen observer of human behavior. His curious nature would make him a key witness to the strange events that would unfold. The flight took off smoothly, gliding into a clear sky. Conversations filled the cabin, punctuated by the occasional laugh of a child or the murmur of the engines. The crew, led by Captain Henri, worked with practiced precision, ensuring the journey progressed as planned. But somewhere over the Mediterranean Sea, fate intervened. The omen. The first sign of trouble came when the onboard radio crackled with static. The experienced co-pilot, Michel, attempted to re-establish contact with ground control, but his repeated efforts yielded only distorted noise. The passengers remained oblivious, their attention focused on the stunning view of the sea below. In the cabin, Claude noticed an elderly woman clutching a rosary. She whispered prayers under her breath, her face pale. Sitting beside her, a young girl tugged at her sleeve, asking why she was worried. The woman didn't answer, but her eyes betrayed her unease. Minutes later, turbulence rocked the aircraft. The passengers gasped, gripping their armrests as the plane shook violently. Captain Leclerc's calm voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered some unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. There's no need for alarm." Despite his reassuring tone, a ripple of fear coursed through the cabin. The mechanical failure. As the turbulence subsided, the plane's lights flickered. Claude, ever perceptive, noticed the anxious glances exchanged between the flight attendants. He decided to investigate. "Excuse me," he said to one of the attendants, a young woman named Sophie. "Is everything all right?" Sophie hesitated before replying. "It's just a minor electrical issue. Nothing to worry about." But Claude wasn't convinced. He observed Sophie rushing to the cockpit, her composure faltering. Inside the cockpit, the situation was dire. The plane's primary navigation system had failed, leaving the crew reliant on outdated charts and a malfunctioning compass. To make matters worse, the engines began to sputter. Captain realized they were in serious trouble but chose not to alarm the passengers. "Prepare for an emergency landing," he instructed Michel. Descent into chaos. The passengers, unaware of the full extent of the crisis, began to grow restless. Claude noticed arguments breaking out and tempers flaring. The elderly woman with the rosary clutched her chest, and a doctor on board rushed to her aid. Suddenly, the cabin lights went out completely, plunging the plane into darkness. Panic erupted. People screamed, children cried, and the flight attendants struggled to maintain order. Claude, ever resourceful, stood up and shouted, "Everyone calm down. Panicking won't help. Let's work together." His words had a calming effect, and the chaos subsided slightly. As the plane descended lower, The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "This is your captain speaking. We are preparing for an emergency landing. Please follow the instructions of the crew and remain seated." The landing. The crew identified a stretch of coastline suitable for a crash landing. With no time to lose, Captain Leclerc executed a daring maneuver, skimming the treetops and aiming for a sandy beach. The impact was jarring. The plane skidded across the sand, its wings scraping against the ground, sending debris flying. Inside, the passengers braced themselves, praying for survival. When the aircraft finally came to a halt, there was an eerie silence. Then, gradually, cries for help and the sound of movement filled the air. Miraculously, most passengers and crew had survived, though many were injured. Survival and reflection. Stranded on the beach, the survivors worked together to tend to the wounded and salvage supplies from the wreckage. Claude took on the role of documenting their ordeal, determined to tell the world their story. Over the next few days, the survivors faced numerous challenges. Scorching heat, limited food and water, and the emotional toll of their harrowing experience. Yet, amidst the adversity, they discovered the power of unity. The elderly woman, once consumed by fear, became a source of comfort for others, sharing her faith and resilience. The young girl who had clung to her grandmother now carried water to the injured, her innocence replaced by courage. Claude watched as the group transformed, realizing that the true death trap was not the mechanical failure of the aircraft but the selfishness and fear that initially threatened to tear them apart. When rescuers finally arrived, the survivors were not the same people who had boarded Air France Flight 736. They had faced death and learned to value life, community, and the strength of the human spirit. As Claude penned his article, he reflected on the strange events of the flight. The mechanical failures, the fear, and the chaos were all tests of character. What mattered most was how people responded. The story of Air France Flight 736 became a tale of survival, resilience, and the enduring power of humanity. It served as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, compassion and unity could turn a potential tragedy into a testament to the strength of the human spirit. And so, the world learned that the greatest death trap was not the external forces that threatened life but the internal struggles that tested one's character.